And we welcome you inside College Football Live. This man came back to the 40 acres himself. Sam Macho, Roddy Zubin, great to have you with us. Let's get right to it. It is playoff week. Let's take a look at the bracket. It'll begin Friday with the all-time blue blood matchup between Alabama and Oklahoma. Then they'll have a triple header on Saturday. The first of three will be Miami and Texas A&M. Neither team has ever gone to the college football playoff. They're making their maiden voyage, and it's safe to say there is no player that has been through as much and has more experience on college football's biggest stage of anybody of the 12 teams than Miami's Carson Beck.
I mean, this is what I came here for. Obviously, back a year ago, I was waiting to, get surgery on my right arm, it's crazy how much can happen in a year. And we knew what had to be done. We knew what we were capable of to put ourselves in a position for the people that were making the decision to see, hey, like these guys are ready and can compete with anybody, kind of like I said after the Pitt game. And I truly believe that. And, obviously they made the decision to put us in, and here we are preparing and have been preparing these past 2 weeks to go face Texas A&M on the road.
Possibility, by the way, of course, he could face Georgia, his old team in the playoff. And if they make it to January 19th, they could be playing Miami, the title game in Miami Gardens. Roddy, let's start with you. They always talk about this being a year-to-year sport, but this guy started 51 games in college. That blows away pretty much any other quarterback in the field. Do you think that can manifest itself in any ways as they get set for this huge game?
I do, Zubin. I do think that experience helps. I mean, this is a guy in Carson Beck that obviously started a ton of games at the University of Georgia, and it's a big environment. He started this year at Florida State, which was a raucous environment. Previously at Georgia, he started games at Texas, at Bama, at Tennessee, at Auburn. And while Kyle Field holds more than all of those, having been in those types of environments, it certainly will help the calm and Carson Beck's ability to manage everything that's going on. There's a lot of things that come with a stadium that loud. Communication, both verbal and especially nonverbal. But Carson Beck's experience through it means that he's not going to be wide-eyed as if this is the first time he's ever seen 100,000 plus in a stadium before.
But it's not just the people in the stadium, but it's also the amount of pressure that could be on Carson Beck in this environment. I go back to a middle of the season this year, a 4-interception game versus Louisville, a game in which they lost. I go back to even last year, there was a span where there was multiple interceptions in a myriad of maybe 3 or 4 games. And so I understand the environment may not be too big as far as the stadium and Kyle Field, but man, sometimes if you put too much pressure on yourself as a quarterback or any position, it may not go in your favor.
Yeah, Sam, I understand the interceptions piece of it, and those are things that Carson Beck has to wear, has to own. But in the last 4 games, he's only thrown 1 pick. And let's not forget, this is a guy that was learning this offense over the course of the season. He didn't have one of his top targets in C.J. Daniels for much of the year. Mark Fletcher at running back was hurt as well. So there was a lot going on around him during that stretch of time where he had 2 interceptions against SMU, 4 interceptions against Louisville. But since then, he has looked much better over the course of the back part of the season. So I'm going to believe that this is a quarterback that just needed experience in this offense. And some of that turnover stuff has gone away. Although the guy on the other side, Marcel Reed, has turned the ball over some down the stretch as well.
You are, and I think that'd be the formula for Miami. It's not to put all the pressure on Carson Beck. It's to rely on your defense, on Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, and to try and force Marcel Reed in interceptions. I think that the way that the formula for Miami to be able to go to a national championship is to win on defense, win in the running game, and then when Carson Beck has to be special, he can be special. We've seen it at times, but haven't seen it all the time.
Miami, Texas A&M, again, both making their playoff debut, although Beck is not. Saturday, first of 3. That'll be on ABC. Beck, of course, is a transfer, and as you've been probably watching the college football news wire this week, you've seen a rash of big-name guys go into the portal yesterday. More to come. College Sports Best Insider Pete Thamel is here. Pete, just a reminder here, keep in mind the portal is just one window this year. We're so used to the 60, the 45 to 30. It's one portal window, January 2 to 15. So take us through some of the big names from yesterday and what you're hearing at the most important position in the sport, starting with Brendan Sorsby of Cincinnati.
Well, Zubin, Brendan Sorsby is going to be one of the hottest names in the transfer portal. He told me yesterday that he informed the Cincinnati coaches he is not going to return there and is likely to enter. It is expected to enter the portal. Sorsby is going to explore his NFL options. He's waiting for his grades to get back. Texas Tech looms as the favorite for Sorsby's services. Indiana's also expected to be involved. Look for him to get a ton of interest. He's a rare blend of size and speed, Zubin. 6'3", 235, productive both on the air, on the ground, accounted for combined 34 touchdowns last year. He's joined in the portal by Nebraska's Dylan Raiola. I was told by sources yesterday Raiola also intends to enter the NCAA transfer portal. Raiola is a 2-year starter at the University of Nebraska, was having a big season this year until he fractured his leg against USC. Look for Raiola to have high-end suitors. DJ Lagway, Florida's quarterback, will also have high-end suitors. Sources told me yesterday he is headed to the portal as well. Lagway started his freshman year 6-1 as a starter. He was the foundation of Florida's season of hope. Didn't work out that way this year. He had a series of injuries in the offseason and camp that slowed his development. The talent is still there for Lagway, though, Zubin. Look for him to also have some high-end suitors to try to revive his career the same way Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels did midway through their careers.
And it ended pretty well for them, and we should mention that Lagway, not too much of a surprise. He was so closely tied to Billy Napier and was so loyal to Napier that once Napier was out, you kind of had the feeling that eventually Lagway would be out as well. So the question naturally is, and Sam, let's start with you here. We're always looking for a difference maker at the most important position in the sport. See if you can find that Pavia. See if you can find that Mendoza, which we'll talk about those two in the weekend they had in just a little bit, out of the portal. Any of the guys Pete mentioned or anybody else floating out there that you think is a real, true difference maker?
Oh, DJ Lagway absolutely is that guy, in my opinion. Out of the 3 names mentioned, that's a true difference maker. I got a chance to run into him at SEC Meet today, and thankfully I didn't actually physically run into him. He's a huge human being, about every bit of 6'4", every bit of what looked like about 250. Broad shoulders, has the athleticism, has the arm to be able to be effective. Now, it is true that he missed a lot of time in camp, and that could have slowed his development. But if he gets into the right system, with the right coaching staff, with the right personnel, I believe that the sky is the limit for DJ Lagway.
Yeah, Sam, I think the top-end talent certainly is there for DJ Lagway. The guy that I look at is Brendan Sorsby, who for most of the season in the Big 12 was leading the Big 12 in QBR. He's one of the most talented players in the country. You talk about size. I mean, this is a guy that's 6'2", 235, and can run, as Pete said. So that dual threat ability, I think, is going to be highly suited. I know Texas Tech has been rumored to be the favorite in the clubhouse, but man, if you look at what Buster Faulkner did at Georgia Tech in the quarterback run game, the ability to push the ball down the field, Brendan Sorsby seems to be a really good fit there. It's just going to be really interesting. There's a ton of teams that could potentially be shopping for quarterbacks in the portal, and some really big names. I mean, you look at Miami, who's done a great job in back-to-back seasons with transfer portal quarterbacks. Florida State could be looking. And then in the college football playoff, what about decisions that have to be made at Oregon by Dante Moore and Alabama with Ty Simpson? Those are 2 teams that may or may not, depending on whether or not they go pro, those quarterbacks go pro, could be searching in the portal as well. It could be a wild transfer portal offseason.
But sometimes, Roddy, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. I think about a guy like Brendan Sorsby, who with Cincinnati, they started off either 6 or 7-1, and he was playing really well. They had weapons. They brought in Cyrus Allen, a transfer from A&M at receiver, Caleb Goody, another transfer, Jeff Caldwell, another transfer, have Joe Royer, one of the top tight ends, and he was successful. Then all of a sudden, the interceptions started to rear their ugly head, and they started to lose down the stretch. And so I think that sometimes it might be better to stay, especially at a place like Cincinnati, who's bringing in people. It's a league you can compete in, and you might want to leave, may not be the best decision.
Yeah, last couple words I'll say here. More than half the playoff field this year, their starting quarterback is a transfer. So it's important. And the one guy we didn't talk about, the one thing Raiola does more than anything is move around. Whether it's high school or college, that dude is always on the move, so it's not a surprise it's happening once again. On the way, 2 years ago, the Michigan Wolverines worked their way all the way through that bracket to win the title. Jim Harbaugh left, Sharon Moore took over, but last Wednesday it all came crashing down, as I'm sure you know. He was fired, arrested, detained on the same day. Viv Poggi, who has some experience on the Michigan staff in the Harbaugh era, is named the interim head coach. They'll take on Texas in the Citrus Bowl New Year's Eve day. And Poggi was down in Orlando promoting the game and basically went into detail on the shock and awe of it all.
It has been a tumultuous time, and a lot of, anger, and then, first disbelief, then anger, then really what we're in right now is the phase of the kids, quite frankly, feel very betrayed, and we're trying to work through that.
It's an amazing gesture. I mentioned he does have experience on the Michigan staff, but this guy has been a whiz in business. He's a self-made millionaire. He does not need to be in this situation, though he's helping on Michigan in a big-time way. Pete Thamel is back. Pete, there's always awkward times when you're looking for a head coach, but considering everything at play here, can you take us through what Michigan is thinking in regard to this most atypical coaching search?
Well, Zubin, let's start with a timeline. I expect Michigan to have kind of exploratory conversations with a number of candidates this week. From the Michigan standpoint, their target is Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer has obviously said a couple things publicly, both in a statement and otherwise, about his focus being on the job at Alabama. They play Friday night. Before Friday night, look for Michigan to touch base with some folks and kind of get to know you conversations. It would be a surprise after talking to sources if the non-Kalen DeBoer category of Michigan coaches doesn't come down to a list that sounds like this: Jeff Brom, Kenny Dillingham, Clark Lee, Eli Drinkwitz, Kyle Whittingham, and Jed Fish. That's the crop, if you will, that Michigan is likely to filter through. But look, Kalen DeBoer's name looms. We saw the statement that he obviously released earlier this week. His quotes were fairly direct. We will see if Michigan tries to take another run at him after the game on Friday, pending obviously the result of Alabama's game at Oklahoma.
It's fascinating because some of the guys you ran through there, including DeBoer, said they're staying. Some have signed contracts. Some have retired. It's incredible how far and wide this search has been. On the back end here, let's just talk about Poggi, Pete, for 1 second. I do remember when Baylor had their awful scandal. Jim Grobe stepped in for 1 year stopgap measure. Just this past season when Troy Taylor was fired at Stanford, Frank Reich stepped in to help Andrew Luck for 1 year. Is there any possibility Poggi could get them through the 2026 season and then they can reset?
Zubin, it doesn't look that way. Michigan, even now, though it's late in the cycle, has a good crop of candidates that it can choose from. And I don't know how it would be any different if they were going to go back in the market, next November, say. The field is the field. Bill Poggi went 6-16 as a head coach at Charlotte. He has been a nice stopgap for Michigan in some different spots here, filling in for Sharon Moore, filling in now. He's a good leader, but I would not expect him to be an interim coach at Michigan past the bowl game.
Fair enough. They hang a sign on the window that says, "Help wanted, college football's all-time winningest program." There are certainly going to be some suitors. Pete, hang tight. We'll have you back to talk Pavia and Manning in just a little bit. Notable head coaching movement. One thing you'll notice is that the middle teams there on your screen are all in the playoff. Penn State had that protracted 54-day search, and Michigan, of course, is looking to move on from Sharon Moore. Bob Chesney is going to take on Oregon with James Madison Saturday. Then he's off to UCLA. Billy Napier is in to replace him in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And Chesney knows all of this is sort of head spinning.
It's important that we all understand whatever next year is next year. It's got to be about us completing this mission of who we are and the mission we're on. And that's the most important thing. I think it's cool for him to be around and just kind of get a feel for how we do things. Obviously, he'll do things however he wants to do things as we go into next year. But I think it's cool for our guys to see him and get a chance to meet him a little bit. It's nice for him to have access to, some of these practices and get a chance to see some of our players. But ultimately, this is this year's team, and that's where the focus has to remain.
It's unbelievable, but this is the way it is. Roddy, let's talk about it. Obviously, we've got teams like Oregon that are losing both coordinators. A&M's losing their offensive coordinator. We just heard from a coach that could be coaching two teams in one day if things don't work out late Saturday night. How do you kind of get your arms around all of this as you prepare for some of these people to play and coach in the biggest game of their lives?
It's hard, Zubin. You mentioned some of the teams that are facing these distractions. I mean, A&M, you mentioned Colin Klein going to Kansas State. Jay Bateman's also taking another job as defensive coordinator as well. Now, Mike Elko's the primary play caller, but still, those voices that are leaving is tough. The thing that these coaches have to do during this time is you have to embrace the chaos. We had an opportunity to catch up with John Summerall before the American Conference Championship game, and that's exactly what he said. He said, "I am loving it because I am running full speed at two places basically at the same time." He recruited two recruiting classes to sign at two different places, 18 players at Florida, 13 at Tulane. So that's how you have to handle it. Sacrifices are going to come someplace. A lot of those sacrifices are sleep. Sometimes those sacrifices might be on Christmas Day, but ultimately you got to get both jobs done to a high level.
I just think it's really hard to get both jobs done at a high level. The sacrifices might be for the players who are playing either in the bowl games or the players for the other team. It's hard if you're John Summerall to be a head coach at one school and still try to coach another school, especially a school that's in the college football playoff. Because think about it, you have to go and recruit. You're trying to sign a class. You have a group of players that's trying to get ready for a college football playoff opportunity, right? Bob Chesney is another example. So I understand that it sounds good and the coaches can say, man, attack it, and that it's a great opportunity. But think about the player's perspective, a player who right now is trying to go win in the college football playoff without their head coach. Some of these guys with a new offensive and new defensive coordinator, I think it could be detrimental to their success.
Now, you mentioned the word high level on the way on College Football Live. Arch Manning bypassing a high-level opportunity to go to the NFL to return to Texas for one more year. Pete's back to take us inside that decision when College Football Live continues. Pavia, the Vanderbilt quarterback, also a finalist. You can kind of see it on your screen. And immediately thereafter, he probably got some advice to put out this statement, which he did, in which he backtracked, talked about Mendoza being an elite competitor, but also wanted to mention that he had been doubted his entire life, and that chip on the shoulder mentality is part of the reason he joined Mendoza in New York. Let's go to Pete to get some quick reaction on this. Pete, they're always talking about at the NFL level, character and all these things off the field. I know we did apologize, but how is this being spun moving forward, and how this might be affecting Pavia down the road?
Look, Zubin, Diego Pavia did not have much draft stock to begin with. He has improved a lot in the throw game from last year to this year, but I called a bunch of NFL scouts mid-season on Pavia. They said he'll be a camp ad. He'll be a tough cut because he's a competitor, but look for a future Grey Cup champion for Diego Pavia. That's his likely projection. All
right. Well, Berman does love the CFL, so perhaps we'll get a Pavia song reference there down the line. One more thing for you here, Pete, just real quick, and I want to ask you about Arch Manning, a guy that does have some serious NFL potential, kind of the opposite of Pavia. Your quick thoughts on the intel that you got on his decision to return to Austin for one more year.
Unsurprising, Zubin, because he was fairly mid, as the kids would say, for most of the season. Finished strong. Let's think about this fun spin forward. 2027 NFL Draft quarterback listing. Arch, Lenora Sellers, Julian Sain, Dylan Raiola, Nico, Darian Mensah, maybe Ty Simpson, Brendan Sorsby, Rocco Beck, Josh Hoover. Sounds like a pretty good class.
No question about it. And if you want to go to the next level, there's a team down in the Bayou that his grandfather used to play for that could certainly use a starting quarterback. We'll see if Archie and the Saints ever come together down the road. Let's go to you. I mean, you know the Texas program as well as anyone. What do you make of this decision, as what Pete said was sort of an up and down year that seemed to end on a pretty high note?
I think it's the right decision for Arch Manning to go back to Texas for another year to continue to develop, but also I think for a year to play without all that pressure. There were so many expectations coming into this season. He was a Heisman favorite before being a full-time starter. Texas was the #1 team. Well, now we can go into a season with the whole year of starting under his belt, and those flashes that we saw can be more consistent. Yes, he's going to continue to grow and develop, but I think the Texas fans could actually see this from, okay, we know what Arch can be, but not these huge mountains of expectations that could cause you to play not as good as you would have hoped.
I don't know, Sam. If he goes and lights it up in the Citrus Bowl, in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, those expectations will certainly be there for him personally, and then obviously Texas is always going to be good. The thing that I love is that Arch's path has followed a more traditional storyline, and we almost seem surprised by it nationally. He comes in, he backs up a future NFL draft pick in Quinn Ewers for 2 years. He starts, he struggles, he develops. Usually the end of that story arc, when you have a guy take the path that he did, is that they end up being pretty good at the end of it. Typically, when they're as talented as Arch is, I would expect the offense to be better around him. I would expect Arch to be better. And it's kind of refreshing, as we started this show talking about transfer portal quarterbacks, that you have a guy who is willing to sit, willing to develop, willing to go through his lumps, willing to go through articles calling him a failure and a flop already, and come out on the other side. Makes you want to root for the kid.
In our last 20 seconds here, what does he need to work on this offseason in your estimation?
It's not even what he needs to work on. I think it's also everyone around him. The running game was really non-existent for the most part of the season. Offensive line struggled, and there were flashes. I would say to have that base be a little bit higher, right? The floor to rise. There are certain plays that shine, that pop off this film for Arch Manning. Just get those more consistent and you'll be A-okay.
All right, there you have it, from one Longhorn to another. For Pete Thamel, Roddy, Sam, I'm Zubin. Thanks for being here. We're back tomorrow at 2 Eastern right here on ESPN2 for more College Football Live.